A new component of the podcast is the last guest writes the first question.
No way. So is it recording now? We're starting? Okay. Yeah. So the way we start here is we just open this up.
And it is blind to both of us. The only parameters I tell the previous guest that they don't know who the next guest is going to be, but don't write like, what's your favorite ice cream? Try to think up something that is poignant.
If you could have dinner with anyone in history, living or dead, who would it be and why? I am debating between Abraham Lincoln and George Washington. I think Abraham Lincoln's obvious. So I'll go with the unobvious and jump off the cliff and say George Washington. I saw an incredible documentary about him that, when he was a young military officer, he actually did a lot of things wrong, but then he learned from it. I think I'd love to just talk to him about the pressure he faced between wanting to be a farmer and then the obligation he felt to be the president of the United States of America. I'd love to know, how did you make it through when you were losing every battle? Because if you think about the origins of our country, he lost and lost and lost and lost again. And now I've got to go across a frozen river to get one win on the board so that my entire country doesn't lose hope. And I don't have money for my men. I don't have food for them. I don't have clothing for them. I mean, it's like such an extraordinary story. And then I would ask him, why are you still holding on to these slaves? You just, you got all this freedom for our country, but but then the amazing thing about him is he freed them. Once both he and his wife died, they were all free. So there was this element of freedom that he had. So I think that would be an interesting thing to talk to him about. I also know people are of their time, so I don't judge historical figures by present standards. But I think George Washington was a very, very interesting person, and I'd love to have dinner with him, and then, if possible, get into some of those deeper questions. Because I think if you really dig into him, he's a fascinating character.
I would imagine that it'd be weird to have that conversation with him, having all of the perspective that we know of what's come after him, to then not load questions. Well, why didn't you do X? You'd almost want to have that conversation without the knowledge that you have today and just maybe try to get into his head. But then on the flip side, I would want to have all that knowledge because I would want to go deeper into some of his decision-making process.
Yeah. And the guy made a lot of great decisions, right? Even his decision to not do a third term. And I think his decision to do a second term was actually country-based. I don't think he wanted to continue on. There was a guy who could have been king. He without him, what do you have? And then, segueing into modern day, I've thought about this, is that, if you look at Afghanistan, right? What if the French had said, you know what? Thank you, but we're going to back somebody else. We know you've got the Watsa with your people, but we're actually going to go for somebody else who's more in line with our values over here in France. I think that there's a lesson there. I think a little bit about that with the implosion in Afghanistan with the Northern Alliance. What happened to those guys that, with the 12 Green Berets cleared out the country and they kind of were sidelined. And, that's something I learned a little bit in this film when I was going around the world. The end of the film, you see Isaac he's in Tunisia because he's in charge of all the military advisors in Africa. And I just thought that was really fascinating because, we as a culture are evolving. We are learning. We have our men and women serving on the front lines. And for Isaac, it was sort of a revelation. And he really enjoyed working with people that wanted us there and that were embracing that. And where we were taking a democracy and trying to, lift them up, and get them ready to really defend themselves, even against another nation. I just thought it's a really fascinating thing if you look at the last 20 years of what's going on a big scale, but it also affects the guys on the ground, both the ones that I've covered in a war zone, but also working with when they come home from the war zone. And sometimes I've got to be prepared to walk through things with them a little bit to help them make sense of their own life.
Well, and the interesting part of the story is that you see a different perspective on service and deployment in that moment, because he's on his last deployment and he knows that his time in the military is coming to an end, but he doesn't want it to end.
Yeah, you know, it's extraordinary. I swear I didn't set my brothers up for this show, which is kind of on target for it, but also, frankly, for the military. Dr. Grazier, who works with us as one of our facilitators, said the way the military ends for most people, 35% are like Joe, where it's sort of on their terms. 65% it's not. You know, a couple of the vets get medically retired in the military, so they had no desire to leave the military, but had to. And in Isaac's case, he doesn't get promoted. He's done great. He's got 4 Bronze Stars. He's deployed 7 times. He's not going to make it to colonel. And so he, in the film, says, if you asked me what I was going to do, I could tell you what I'm going to do for the next 10 years. But I'm about to, impart on a road I have no knowledge of, and I wasn't prepared to go down. That film is it is about the transition. You see the warfighter in the war zone, you flash to the veteran they become. Some are master sergeants now, but some are out of the military, and some are recently out of the military. So it's kind of interesting for me to come to him at the end of the film. I, as his brother, learned a ton leading up to that moment by following up with all the other veterans who are in different stages of that transition, Big Earn was fresh and struggling with taking off his uniform and talks about that loss of identity. And then you got guys like Ben who struggled with the same thing. And I had him talk about that because he's so successful now that I wanted to make sure that our viewers were understanding that he had all the obstacles that everybody else had. He just made a lot of really good decisions to get there. And even after the film is completed, Joe is now retired, and the things I learned in the film, I helped him through his transition because he moved to a new city for his wife and had to find employment. And Isaac has been a long journey, frankly, a long spiritual journey. I think he's still on it a little bit to make that transition. He's in a much better place now. He's sort of come to peace with it, and I think he's starting to enjoy some of the new pieces of his life. But you're right. I mean, it was extraordinary to be sitting in a Coliseum, the 3rd largest ever built, and having him reflect on his career, its end, and where do we go from here? I mean, if you can imagine, I was literally in this Coliseum where Romans used to fight 2,000 years ago. It was like an epic place to have this conversation, which for him in his life was pretty epic as well, right?
To appease the marketing aspect of everything, let's lay the foundation. So first movie is Brothers at War, 2008.
Yeah, it came out, I was in Iraq, 05, 06. I screened it in 07 in Baghdad. Then it came out, 08 was its world premiere at the GI Film Festival. 2009, it came out in movie theaters around the country, and then it was on Showtime in 2010, and then around the world.
And then what we're talking about now is the follow-up to that movie, Brothers After War, that is coming out when?
It's coming out February 28th. So Brothers After War, the first film was so extraordinary, and people came to the movie theaters. They saw it as a group, a lot of camaraderie, a lot of shared experience there. And they came to me and they said, we just had our first real conversation about his or her experience overseas. And so I thought, man, that's really powerful. And because of that, we created a journal and eventually a workshop. And all of that led to me sitting here in front of you right now. So in 2019, after working with literally tens of thousands of veterans coming home from war and helping them walk through that and their families, and helping use the film to make tough subjects easier to talk about and to start those conversations and healing, and sometimes therapy, sometimes couples counseling. We've saved some lives. I went to Gary Sinise and I said, I'd like to do a follow-up film. I'd like to return and revisit these folks. I've spent all these years helping other veterans. I'd really like to know how the ones that I met in Iraq, how my friends are doing. And he agreed. He said, okay. And he said, look, I want to know how they're doing and what do they need? So I went off in 2019 and I started traveling the entire world, 4 continents. And it was an extraordinary journey. And then we worked on the film for about 3 or 4 years, and then recut it and finished it. And then it's coming out in about 120 movie theaters across America on February 28th, and then 36 military movie theaters around the world, probably the week after.
And getting Gary Sinise behind it is a big tool or a big leverage for this movie. I believe he's also, if I understand correctly, sponsoring or donating a bunch of tickets for the movie.
That's correct. So Gary Sinise saw the film in 2007. A Marine actually recommended it to him. He saw it the day before Thanksgiving, fell in love with it, started telling me what to do. So he became executive producer of the first film, and he was extraordinary. And he said told the story of everything he wanted to tell the American public about our military families. But when I brought him the journal, he was the one who set up the first workshop. Then he said, you should make a video. So, because generals are busy. So I made a video. And he has been sponsoring the Gary Sinise Foundation in 2019, started sponsoring all the seminars and workshops. They also sponsored the sequel. And this film is extraordinary and a bit unique because Gary has been a part of this film since the very beginning. And Gary, as you know, is a Palme d'Or winner, Emmy Award winner, director, writer, actor, producer. So this one was unique in that he really let me have a free hand. Like, we talked about the budget. I asked for more and he eventually said yes. So I could go around the world. I jumped out of the airplane without telling him. Okay. But he thought I said I made a great choice once he saw it. You
looked very calm heading into it.
I appreciate you saying that. I was scared, man. That was nuts. I was like, what have I gotten myself into? That moment of like being on the precipice of going out that plane. And then, Derek, as you know, is a Ranger out on the Syrian border. He says, there's nothing like going at the earth 150 miles an hour. So of course we had to cut to him as a professional skydiver taking me skydiving today. So that's kind of the theme of the film. Where are they? What are they doing? So I go and do it with them. And I know I look calm. I have to say I probably went back into my the space I was in when I would go out with these guys on missions in Iraq, where I just get real kind of quiet and calm, focus, take a deep breath and go, okay, here we go. And
was your first time skydiving?
It wasn't my first time. My first time was in Chicago, when in my 20s, and it happened so quickly I didn't even think about it. It was my first time since then. So it's my first time skydiving probably in 25 years. I think it was a little scarier this time because I've got 2 kids. It was awesome to do that with Derek because he's such a great dude. But I'll never forget. And you can see it in the film. Every time I notice it, we're outside the, we're about to go out of the side of the plane.
Let me say this real quick before see if we're on the same page. Is there a little bit of Derek going, all right, let's go, and you're not going?
No. I was doing what I was supposed to do. He said we're going to go 1, 2, 3, and go. Okay, right. But he's he took my my
Tuck
chin.
Your head.
He took my chin and just turned it slightly, and then we're 1, 2, 3, and then when you go out, you've got to arc your back and just it's so unnatural and just go for it, And then they're like, our buddy's going to film you, so you might want to smile and throw your thumbs up. So I did, So it was awesome. It was awesome. And I really feel like if you really want to get to know our service members, you want to get to know our veterans, you have to walk a mile in their shoes. You have to go where they are. You have to do what they do. And then once you do, and you feel that adrenaline rush and that excitement, it transitions naturally. He did that unprompted. He's like, it's just like when you were out with us in Iraq. We go out on mission, we rest, and the conversation flows. So that's always been part of my technique, is to really if I'm going to interview a sniper, I will, if I can, if they invite me, which they did, I'm going to go out with him on a mission. I'm going to go out with the snipers. I'm going to film them. I'm going to be out there with them and endure the same things they endure. Or a Marine, I'm going to do a 16-hour day with him out on a mission. If they get shot at, I'm going to get shot at. And then I'm going to interview him about it. And I just feel like you get to a much deeper place if you walk a mile in their shoes, if you're there with them, if you take the same risks. then they feel like, okay, you kind of get it. So now I'll open up even more. And I think in Brothers After War, that's kind of the beauty of it, is that because I was at war with them and because I've been doing these seminars and workshops for, their brothers and sisters in arms, they kind of dropped the invisible wall and got really real, because it was, they were talking to somebody who kind of understood, they felt, but also, as my brother says, if it'll help another soldier, that's why I'm telling you this.
Going back to Gary Sinise real quick, for somebody who's going to catch this when Brothers After War first comes out, what's the process for them to get tickets for the movie?
Well, there's two processes. They can go to ticketsbrothersafterwar.com. For veterans, first responders, and their families, the Gary Sinise Foundation is doing something very, very special. They want as many people as possible to see this on the big screen with their families and with their comrades or their friends. We think it's going to create communication and camaraderie. So they have donated 15,000 tickets. They've donated $150,000 to VetTix to buy veterans, first responders, and their families a free ticket to the movie so they can see it how we intended for them to see it on the big screen.
It's very cool. I actually want to go back real quick to the opening question. From the movie, you document a little bit of the tracing of I believe your grandfather's service in Italy, parachuting out, basically getting caught behind enemy lines. Did you have the opportunity to know him much as a young man? And would that be somebody you'd want to go back and have dinner with?
Oh, you don't even know. I would totally love to be with him. I never met him. He died when my dad was 21. I'm making a short documentary, a little side documentary about my grandfather and about our quest to understand him better and kind of as the three sons sort of uncover all the stuff to help my dad better know his father. In that, my dad, reveals he lost his mom when he was 16. He lost his dad when he was 21. So he graduates from college. His dad's gone. He knows he's gotten into medical school, but he's not there. And he gets emotional. He says, I was 27. I had my first child. I had no one to call. So I would love for my dad to be able to know his grandfather better. Making this film was extraordinary. When I I was just an actor. I didn't have any money to make the first film. I took all the money. I ran up the credit card and all that. I went back to my hometown in Decatur, Illinois, and 18 small business owners, family, and friends put the money together so I could go to Iraq to tell my brother's story. And there were a couple of them that said, you remind us of your grandfather. And I thought that was really cool. I thought that was super cool. And when I look at pictures of him, he looks like his namesake Joe. And so going back to Italy and walking the same ground where he parachuted out of a plane against his will. I think he'd be horrified to find out his grandsons were paratroopers when he was a pilot. But to walk that ground and be looking around and be thinking about like he served right here. And then eventually I got an opportunity to meet some of the children of the Italian partisans who fought alongside my grandfather and talk to them about that experience and get it from the Italian side. It was extraordinary. It was extraordinary. And just to be thinking about his life and what it was like, what is it like to be 20, 21 behind enemy lines, literally, in a foreign country where you have to learn Italian to get by. And then next thing you know, you're coordinating ammo drops, sabotages, ambushes, fighting side by side with the Italian partisans for 6 months. Your family thinks you're dead at first, then you're missing in action. Then eventually they find out that, you're still alive. It's extraordinary when you think about his experience. Another thing that's really important about his journey that I've learned is he used to be the one to organize the reunions for his air companies that he flew with. And he also reunited with the Italian partisans he served alongside with. Both he came to Italy and they came to Decatur, Illinois.
Sponsorship for this podcast comes from Brothers in Arms USA. They're a veteran-owned and operated clothing and accessories brand that's 100% American-made. Every piece tells a story of brotherhood, respect, discipline, and honor. Deeply inspired by those who serve, those who have served, and those who have paid the ultimate price serving our great country. Whether you're an outdoor enthusiast, a proud patriot, or simply somebody who values high-quality American craftsmanship, they've got something for you. Go check out brothersinarms.com, spelled out fully, brothersandarms.com, and use the promo code TRANSITION20 to get 20% off your purchase.
And I think that's a lesson I'd love to pass on to, our veterans and first responders. I think it's incredibly important to stay in contact with those you served with because they have a unique understanding of your experience, and you should stay connected. And I would encourage people to do reunions. I basically did, 12 reunions in the film, and it's changed me forever. I also think you have to develop relationships with people outside the military, because I think it stretches you as a person. It expands who you are, and you want to be really interacting with all the parts of yourself as you move, past your service into the next phase of your life. I think my brothers and then other veterans that I've talked to, if they really do that, they really appreciate it. They like to be with veterans, but they also sometimes like to be with people that aren't veterans, just to give you that broad experience. It's a huge identity change. And I think what I've learned from making the film is that you need to embrace change. You have to embrace the fact that I'm changing. I'm now a veteran. Part of my military service will always be a part of me, but we also want people to be in the present and throw some lines into the future. Like what could we be excited about in the future as well? Like what might be fun? And I think Joe does that in the film so beautifully. I mean, here's a guy who deployed 9 times, 6 times with the reconnaissance team of the 75th Ranger Battalion, right? So he's done it. And he's talking about what's next. He's talking about,
a self-sustaining farm and making wine. Did it happen?
Yes. Yes, it has. So he's actually bought that land with his brothers. He doesn't live there yet. He's not there yet. But he actually has gone in with Isaac and Joe, and they've bought half a mountain in Virginia near where Isaac lives. 16 acres of that are perfect for growing vines. So right now what he's doing, he's working in commercial lending. What I did with Joe, and since this show is about transition, I'll tell you guys, Joe came out of the service. His wife was in Duke for nursing. He said, "It's your turn, babe." So she, followed him around, especially when he was in special ops. It was a rough life, which I think we talk about in the film. It's she does a wonderful job of opening up about that. But he said, "It's your turn." She got into Duke for nursing. It was a new dream for hers. He supported it. So he moved from Fayetteville to Raleigh-Durham. He needed to find a job. So first thing sometimes people do is they go, well, what can I easily get hired for? I got all these special operator skills. It's obvious where he could go, right? He could be a contractor. He could obviously do security. There's a lot of things he could do. But what I said to him was, I said, I want you to get a piece of paper out, and I want you to write 1 to 10. What do you really want to do? Start at number 1 and let's move down. You want to be an investment banker. He'd gotten an MBA while he was still in the service. Well, I said, let's go start looking. He found out, well, I got to move to New York, maybe Chicago, Boston. I'm not going to move. I got to be here. I can't do that. Next down, private equity. I've got to go to Chicago for that. It's not, and if he was in Chicago, maybe we could hook him up with people we knew. Third, commercial lending. He focused on agriculture, business on his MBA. So he started looking around for that. That's what he ended up getting a job in. He got a job in lending with an agricultural focus. And he's enjoying the work. It's interesting to him. He really likes it, and on the side, he's got some land, and at some point he'll do the vines like he talks about in the film. And I think it wasn't easy for him. The other thing I learned from making this film was that if veterans are transitioning, I hope this doesn't come off the wrong way, but it might be good to have some friends who have been in the civilian sector getting jobs for a long time. Because to be honest, Joe reached out to me, and I was his coach while he was looking for a job. And what I found was I talked to him 3 times a week and stuff like this. Well, he's a master sergeant, right? With a pretty cool tabs on him. in the military. So when he sends an email, he gets responses. So he sends an email. He goes, I sent an email for last week. He hasn't got back to me. I go, Joe, he's a vice president of like marketing. He's slammed. He's probably got 10 people reporting to him. He's probably got a wife and kids. He's getting hundreds of emails a day. He's not blowing you off. He's just busy. You're like a guy from outside his company who's looking for him to do you a favor to hook you up with human resources, which is not his department.
Yeah.
Just be gracious. Just follow up. Just say, hey, thank you again so much for meeting with me or offering to hook me up. And he did. And he got a contact. That ended up not being the job, but he just kept going and kept his perspective correct and pursued what he really wanted, landed a job, and now he's doing great. And, I guess I'm passionate about that because, in Brothers After War, when I was making the film, it became very evident to me painfully evident at times, that transition is very hard for our soldiers and Marines and service members. And some of them, I think, really struggle. I think the beauty of the film is it's organic. These are the people that I actually was with. So it's like a real cross section. I'm not cherry picking sad stories or success stories. These were the people that I met in Iraq. But in doing that, I feel like some of them really had some real struggles. I think that's maybe the gift of the film is they authentically articulate that. And then we also put a lot of solution that they found, things that work for them to get to the next stage. But I am passionate about, these topics because I feel like if you volunteer to service and if you go into harm's way, I feel like we as a society owe everything we can to help you, come back and get on to a great next stage of your life. I think it's also on our veterans to lean into that a little. You got to embrace that it's changed, that it's going to be difficult, that you're going to have to grow. I think there's an element of that as well, but I also feel like there's a responsibility on society's side to lean forward as well and go like, hey, what do you want to do? What can I do? In my case, it was Joe, right? Like I'd love to do it for all vets. And I've been able to mentor some and even hire some and do things like that or give advice to others. But I do feel like if we all as a society tried to think about how we could at least help one veteran transition or mentor them, like how much better would all of our veterans and first responders as they move on be?
And that's what's fortunate, that each day that goes by, there's more and more groups that are created and in place to try to be that bridge. Because you bring up a great point. Joe was used to, for years, if he sent an email, he got an immediate response.
Yeah.
What he didn't realize was, to that marketing manager or whoever it was, once the email signed off Joe, all of the acronyms and letters and everything else that he would normally have in his signature line turned to Greek. It didn't matter to him.
It's true.
It was just Joe, and that's one of the things that we have to realize when we leave these careers. They are a great, huge key to open up almost any door you want to open. And the uniform and the service gets you through that door. But you better be stepping out of that uniform as you're walking through that door and start realizing that you got to sell you. The uniform opened the door. It's you that's going to keep you in that door.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, because it is you. And then all that background is just really exciting to the person looking at you. They go, wow, you've done all that. That sounds so cool. But you still have to sell them on, you can do that job right there that's in front of them. And sometimes, sir, I can speak really a lot about veterans. I know, because I've been in that space for a long time. I know sometimes veterans, especially the ones who have higher rank, if they're willing to take what they consider a step back into a role where they get to learn the new business, then they tend to thrive. All the things that they learned, being on time, focus on mission, focus on the team, goal setting, they will thrive in their new career. But if you don't know how to build bicycles, they're not going to make you vice president of marketing of bicycles or manufacturing, because you never built a bicycle before. Just like you wouldn't have a vice president of bicycle marketing all of a sudden be a battalion commander or a sergeant major. Like that would be disastrous. Like you actually have to work your way up to leading a battalion or being a first sergeant or something like that. Like 36 people's lives are in your hand. they're not going to put Jake in there. I'm a really good storyteller, but I'm not going to like, I know how to not get killed, but I'm not going to be able to go like, this is how we're going to take this house down. You know, that's not smart. But I will say this. Part of the reason why the Gary Sinise Foundation and myself and why we were releasing the film in movie theaters is to also make it easier when someone walks in that door with all that experience for the person across the desk to know who they're looking at and why. I think going to see a movie in a movie theater where everything gets dark, the distractions go away, if I can invite the folks that maybe didn't serve overseas, that haven't been in those experiences, to spend an hour and 45 minutes seeing, feeling, hearing, thinking, what's it like to be a veteran, both overseas, but also transitioning home. I think more empathy gets created for those veterans, more understandings. It's easier to have those conversations. So I think in a small way, my dream scenario for the film would be to kind of like the heavy artillery, sort of loosen the ground up a little bit,
right,
with the person across the desk, from our veterans when they come home. So we look at them and we go, wow, I guess I have a sense of what you've been through. You know what teamwork is. You know what it is to work hard or work through the night on a mission, and working with first responders. I've seen the same thing. I've worked with LAPD. I've worked with, FDNY. It's slightly different, but very similar in some ways. You have to focus on the fire. It doesn't stop until it's done. And your life isn't the life of someone else's. Police officers, it's pretty crazy. Sometimes it's just two of you if something goes down. You got to make a lot of decisions right there on the spot. You can't turn and look at the other 35 guys. It's just the two of you, right? And you're not always going to make the best call. I mean, that's something that I've always struck with, is that, it's not like a video game. If you've been shot at, it's not a video game. Like even if you're doing well, the adrenaline's rushing, right? Things are slowing down. Maybe you're making really good decisions, but even then it's like, it's intense. And I don't think people think about that when they're trying to look at a police officer in a situation. I don't know that they've ever been in that situation and know, like, it's really tough. Somebody's shooting at you, or you think they're going to shoot at you, or there's a lot going on. It's very kinetic. Things are moving fast. So, on the flip side of that, I think the more the film can sort of bring society to where our veterans really are, I think some great things can happen.
To underplay or not underplay the feeling aspect, anybody who watches this movie, if you don't come out of it with a punch in the gut in several of the scenes, and I'll say for me, I still think back to that, man, your conversation with Hunter. It is gripping. But one of the things that I think is really good for the general public to see, and like we talked about before, these are horrendous careers. There are people who are needed to go do them, but they impact us. And to see 10, 15 years later, some of these men, what their life is now and what experiences they've had, it really shines a lot of light on all the baggage that we carry away from these careers.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point. So Hunter wanted me to interview her. That's how that happened. For 30 minutes, she wasted my time. I mean, it was just like, I'd ask her a question. She goes, I don't know, like a little girl. And I got my cameraman who'd been in Iraq with me literally told me later, he was thinking, well, I wonder how he's going to get out of this one. You know what I mean? Like, and there's this moment where I just went, Hunter, why did you want me to talk to you? And she goes, I want people to know what it's like to have your dad deploy 4 times to a war zone. And then it was game on. Then it was real. She was opening up. She's 11 years old and she's telling her uncle how she feels. What she told me in the film, she never told her dad. I mean, that's one thing I've learned from the seminars and the workshops is I do the interviews and let people open up and share. And I've learned it's actually good for them to do that. And then after the fact, I do things like, Isaac, Hunter has something she wants to tell you about. No, I don't want to tell you. I actually told Isaac with Hunter's permission. She gave me, but the other thing that's really extraordinary about that moment, and I've seen this track with a ton of veterans, is my brother's cried twice that I've seen in the last 25 years. Everyone else left. It's just he and I and my brother who died. That was the first time I saw him cry. He broke down, when we just hugged, And that was the second time in this movie. Of everything he's done, 7 deployments, he is crying because it takes 6 months to be dad again after you come home from a deployment. I mean, think about that. That's pretty extraordinary. That's the impact. That's service. And that is something that tracks for everyone that goes overseas and comes home, regardless of what their MOS is. They all leave their families behind and make that sacrifice for the rest of us. So, I know that's an emotional moment for people, but honestly, I think it's good because I think it really is like a touchstone for the folks who've lived through that. It really is good for them because they realize they're not alone. And sometimes it can spark a really important conversation and some connection. And for those who haven't experienced that, they say stuff like, it touched me and I had no idea the level of sacrifice. And I feel like they need to know that's part of what we're asking of people as well. And that their children serve too.
Their families serve. And men and women often say this, it's their spouse at home who gets really kind of saddled with the biggest brunt of the burden. Because when things are falling apart, you don't have the ability to call your spouse and go, hey, I need you to come home early today because XYZ is happening. You're on your own. And so it is. And then you bring up a great point. A child sees their parent deploy. Parent comes home, and like you said, it takes 6 months to be dad again. But if you're in a workup to redeploy, as soon as it's getting back to quote unquote normal, you're spitting back up to redeploy. And so you do this for a career. Then, and then people wonder why. And I've seen it on the first responder side. Men and women get deep into certain positions. Talk to anybody who's been a homicide detective 15 or 20 years. They'll all tell you, man, I missed 75% of my kids' baseball games and all this because you're running 24, 48, 36 hours straight. It just, these careers take a lot out of us and they take a lot out of our families. Before we go into the movie, I'd like to actually take a little bit step back, get a little bit better idea of you so that you've mentioned Decatur, Illinois' hometown.
Yeah.
You mentioned your brothers. Where do you fall in the order? And what was your drive to movies and movie making where they went military?
That's a great question. So I'm from Decatur, Illinois. Had a typical childhood. Went to Catholic school, grade school, high school, played soccer. Was in Boy Scouts. My dad took me to West Point when I was 14 and I fell in love with the place. And I thought, man, I'd love to, I really wanted to be a fighter pilot. I would and follow my grandfather's service because he was a pilot in World War II. I wanted to be a pilot, but I put glasses on it the first time when I was 7 and I saw leaves for the first time. And I thought, okay, well, we know that's not going to happen. I'm never going to be a pilot. So that's off the table. I said, okay, well, if I can't be a pilot, maybe an infantry commander would be cool. And I thought the experience would really help mold me and help learn some things that I felt I needed to learn to be a leader. So I thought, okay, I'll go to West Point and go for that. And in high school, I worked my butt off to be able to get accepted. And I would have gotten accepted. It was my first choice. I filed early admittance or whatever and would have been accepted. I was accepted. I couldn't get the waiver for my eyes. I also quit boxing in college because I've got, myopia is half the size of a normal person's. I'm very nearsighted. So it cost me a couple things I really liked. But I didn't get in. I had a dream to go to West Point and serve in the military, and I didn't get to do it. So kind of crushed me a little bit.
Now, when your dad took you to visit, was that because you wanted to go see it, or did your dad serve?
My dad did not serve. My dad wanted to go off to Vietnam as a Marine, and father of the person he was dating said, "You're an idiot if you do that." So he didn't do it. He went to medical school instead. He got into medical school because he did want to be a doctor. And then he asked, after medical school, he tried to go into the military, and they're like, "We don't need you." It was Vietnam was wrapping up. They were cutting tons of positions, and they just didn't need him, you know. And the same Marine from World War II said, "Look, they need doctors more than they need you as a Marine gun. So go to medical school and then go be a doctor in the military. If you want to be a doctor in Vietnam, you still have plenty of work for you over there." So my dad had always kind of wanted to serve and didn't get the chance, so to speak. And so he always was, I think, a little bit romantic about it. He always read the books, and James Bond was his favorite novel. And he was very respected in the community, very, very good doctor. So whenever you go anywhere, people come up to him and want to talk to him. And what he thought was cool was military service. And he took us to Gettysburg when we were 11. He took us to Washington, D.C. He took us to all the monuments. He talked about citizenship. We got a tour of the FBI when I was a kid. So all these things he introduced us to, right? And he's a doctor, so we worked really hard. So we didn't have as much time with him, but he would take us on vacation sometimes and share this love of the country and the people that serve in the FBI or the military with us. And so when I expressed an interest, he put me on an airplane and he flew me out to West Point to tour it. He had a colleague whose son was there. So I'm there at West Point, and he's a senior, goes, "You want to go rappelling?" And I'm like, I'm in loafers and khakis. I don't know if I'm dressed for this, but I'm like, what is this place where they're asking me if I want to go rappelling in the middle of the day? I might have to try this out. So I was like, yeah, let's go. I didn't get in. My parents were so smart and said, "You need a backup." So at the last minute, they helped me repackage my essays and everything like that. And I applied to Northwestern and Notre Dame. And so I got into Notre Dame. I went to Notre Dame. And I was trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do with my life. I always kind of liked finance. So I thought, oh, maybe I'll be first actually a historian. So I was going to be a historian. Then I was like, okay, maybe finance, investment banking. I did an internship in Chicago. I set up 3 meetings with 3 Fortune 100 companies as an intern. Think about that, a 20-year-old intern. The woman running the office didn't want to take me on a business meeting, but another guy gave me a crack, and I started making calls. He's like, "If you set up a meeting, I'll take you." I was like, okay. So I set up meetings, and he took me. And then the CEO of the company was giving me money to go buy beers at the Cubs game. I wasn't even 21, so I'm drinking with the CEO. The president of the company's like, "You're definitely coming to work here after this, And I've accomplished this amazing thing as an intern. And I go sit on my couch in Chicago, and I feel very empty inside. And I realized I made a company a lot of money today. So what? That didn't do it for me. So I went to Ireland with that in my heart, and I discovered acting and writing, and I just gave it a shot. And I won some awards as a writer, and I got going on it. I kind of liked it. And then
Did you have a connection to Ireland before you went?
No, I'm just so bad at foreign languages. I thought, if I'm going to go overseas, I should go somewhere that speaks English. So that's what I did. I literally, my German was horrible. My French, even though I studied for 4 years, wasn't. I thought I might starve. So I thought, let's go to Ireland. They had this exchange program at Trinity College Dublin. I went there. It was awesome. It was great. I was I was a finance and English major. I was never going to finish the English part. And I called my parents from Ireland. I said, "Look, I've
discovered Guinness. I'm never leaving."
No, that would have been okay, but that's not what I did. I had done one play. I'd been cast in a second one. Now realize I've done one play. I've done 6 lines. I've been cast in another one. I did write an external monologue that got me into a very prestigious writing workshop with Sebastian Barry, who was up for the Olivier Award that year. So as a writer, I actually had gotten down the road a bit, right? As an actor, I'd done 6 lines and got some laughs. You know what I mean? And I was about to mumble my way or fumble my way through a Moliere play. But I was in love. I loved it. And it fired me up.
Never acted before?
Never acted before, ever. I was an athlete in high school. I never acted. And in the last year and a half of college, I did 8 plays. So you could say when I go for something, I go for it. So I did 8 plays. But before I did the second play, I called my parents and said, look, I'm going to drop out of college, move to New York and be an actor. They lost their minds. They lost their freaking minds. We fought for 5 hours. This is back when international calls were expensive. 5 hours on my dad's dime. We were screaming at each other across the Atlantic Ocean. We're going to cut you off. I use that money for food. You know what I mean? Like, so this goes on for 2 days. Now, I had been in Germany with some cousins over the Christmas break, and I wrote this. I'm remembering right now. I wrote this 5 or 6 page letter, and I actually think I talk about my grandfather, and my other grandfather who's a vet, and I just said, look, you always said I could do whatever I put my mind to, and I got to do this. I gotta follow my heart. I can't pursue something that's not filling me up spiritually. I've got to go for something that means something. And I wrote this 5 or 6 page letter. So on Monday, pick up the phone, talking to my dad. I'm expecting another 5-hour transatlantic fight. He goes, Jacob, I got your letter. It's okay. I understand. To which I said, well, at least we know there's hope for me as a writer. So that's
so basically you're always the serious one.
Yeah. Seriously. No, I definitely use humor to deflect or whatever they call it. No, I was going to go off to West Point. Isaac won the acting award in high school. He was going to be an actor, but as brothers go, I didn't get in. So all of a sudden he goes, oh, that might be interesting. Maybe I'll go do that. And he was great. He was a leader in high school. What's your age
difference?
2 years. I'm 2 years older than him. And so, he probably became tougher because I don't think I was that rough on him, but he thinks I was. But I think I was a pretty nice older brother, as older brothers go. But, the second oldest is pretty physical because, we did do sports together. He felt competitive. He's a competitive guy. So, he did great in sports, pretty good academically. Actually, he's a very smart guy. So the admissions officer for West Point doesn't want to turn down 2 brothers from the same family. So he goes, do you feel like your grades reflect your ACT scores? And Isaac goes, nah, I had a pretty good time in high school. He goes, okay, we're going to send you to the prep school for 1 year, and then you go to West Point. And so that's how he got to West Point. Joe was one of these kids who would play ditch. You'd never find him. Like the game's over, everybody's home, and Joe comes out from the dirt, somewhere. So like we knew he was going to be a sniper or something from the get-go. Like Joe always wanted to be a soldier. He was like dressing as army guys when he was 7. Like he was the one like from the beginning, like he's going into the army. So he graduated high school in 3 years with like the worst grades possible, but he graduated. And then mom made him promise he'd go to college, and then she would sign the paper when he was 17. He turned 18 in Fallujah. And, Isaac made some introductions, and he got on a 2-man sniper team as an 18-year-old and did 120 missions. So, that's sort of their story about why they did it. I had wanted to do it. I think some of that plays into the first film. I think that desire to serve was there, and there was no ability to do anything. And so I think when my brothers came home and said, hey, look, the truth is not coming home, I think that's where I saw an opportunity all of a sudden, because I now have gone to Chicago, started my career, done a ton of acting, moved to LA, booked some voiceover jobs, made a few bucks. This was 2004. And then I come out to Fayetteville, and I literally said to Isaac and Joe, I go, what are you guys doing over there? Because it looks like you're ripping the place apart. And Isaac's like, sit down and I'll tell you. I rebuilt 22 schools, 12 health clinics, 2 factories, which now employ 5,000 people. I helped them set up their city council. Jake, I had to teach him what democracy was, because that wasn't a big concept under Saddam Hussein. And I was just like, why have I never heard about any of this? He goes, I don't know. We had journalists with us, and actually they put a pretty good story together. We open a school, bus would blow up. It was Fallujah. They'd run across town. They get an image of the burning bus. But by the time it made it through the editing room in New York City, all you saw was the burning bus and the U.S. body count that day. So as a brother, as a family member, that pissed me off. So I decided to take all the money I ever made, went back to my hometown, and I got permission from the Department of Defense, and I went to Iraq And I
What
joined
was that
Isaac
process
and
like?
Mosul. Oh, I mean, it was insane. It's kind of like now, except I was younger, so I could tolerate 36-hour days straight better.
Your body is built for more energy, more focus, more strength. But if you're feeling sluggish, unmotivated, or mentally drained, it's time to make a change. At Human Performance TRT, science meets convenience. Their hormone replacement therapy, weight loss programs, and mental health solutions are all designed to help you feel and perform at your best without ever leaving home. They offer medical-grade hormone optimization, weight loss support with personalized health coaching, and ketamine therapy for depression, anxiety, and trauma, all guided by qualified mental health professionals. HPTRT is veteran and first responder owned, and they make it simple to optimize your health. There's no locked-in contracts, and if you're already on a hormone program, switching is easy. There's no extra test if your blood work is under 6 months old. Ready to take back your edge? Go to hptrt.com and use the promo code TDP for 30% off. That's hptrt.com and use the promo code TDP for 30% off your entire program. Stop waiting. Your peak performance starts now.
That process was crazy. You know, I interviewed Isaac, and that's in the movie. I filmed him leaving. That's in the movie. There's also an interview that I did with him halfway through his deployment. And I remember saying to him, "Hey, I'll see you in Iraq." And he just looked down and he was like, "Yeah, okay." And he didn't believe I was ever going to make it. And I promised myself right then and there, I was like, okay, I'm going to do everything I can to make it to Iraq. And if I don't make it, no one would have been able to do it from where I was starting. So I finished that video. Norman Powell saw the video through a friend, Anna Mathias, at the William Morris. She's like, I told her what I was doing. She hooked me up, and I met with him. Then he quit. And I was like, look, the Department of Defense you've been nominated for 4 Emmys. Like, you're the producer I need. So if I can raise the money, will you do it? And he goes, yeah, if you can raise the money. Went back to my hometown. My uncle said no. And then I went to a guy by the name of Kevin Brahaney on a Saturday, and he grilled me for an hour. And then he said, okay, I'm going to do it. Here's $25,000. And then he introduced me to other people, and it was like insane. I spent 30 days just like working my butt off, talking to everyone, trying to raise the money. And eventually 18 people wrote me small checks, and I contacted the Department of Defense. I said, I'm back, because they like the idea. They like the idea of a brother going into a war zone to tell his brother's story. And like I said, I'd won awards as a writer. I had done tons of acting at this point. I'd done a little bit of producing, but not much. So, and they required me get a real experienced producer on board, which I did. So like I put all that together, and then I came back, and they said, okay, we're going to support this. And then we went out to Iraq, and then the rest is history. I mean, it was a hard work. It took a year of just utter obsessive focus to get it done. And I got to Iraq like a week before Isaac left. So I got there, he got me out to the Syrian border with his guys, got to film that reunion. He went home, and I sent a cameraman home with him. And then I stayed in Iraq, another 4 or 5 weeks to do more of interviews and go around more. And frankly, thank God I did, because some of those interviews and that time I spent in Iraq is the basis for Brothers After War. That in-depth coverage. And the other thing that's unique about this film is I came out as an actor, as a writer. So as an actor, what do? You try to understand human beings, why they do what they do. You look at them not like black or white. People do things for many, many reasons. So you look at someone as a complicated person with, maybe some good, maybe some bad, maybe there's different motivations, maybe some altruistic, maybe some selfish, but they're a whole person, right? It's a collective as the person you're looking at. So I brought all that into this role as a filmmaker. And when I was out there, people knew I was a brother, and I was there to tell my brother's story. So I think that's always been a unique aspect of these movies, is that this is an insider's look at military service. This is a brother asking his brother and other, brothers from other mothers and sisters. We got a female veteran in this as well. Why are you doing this? And trying to capture the truth, the essence of the story. And those interviews are what set this up. Because the new film has footage you've seen in Brothers at War, but it has a lot of footage no one's ever seen. because I did like 2-3 hour interviews with these folks. So the new film was fun because we would go back and like Jen's like, before the military, I was working with other people's kids and I just hate working with other people's kids.
Now I'm a doctor of fun.
Yeah. Cut to modern day. I just love working with kids, you know, and she's in Las Vegas and she's working with special needs kids. What do we want to listen to today?
Disney or Kid Bop?
Yeah, exactly. You remember lines from the film. I mean, like these people were really special. And I got to learn that because I was looking at them as human beings and I was really interested in them and getting to know them and what made them tick. So I wasn't just like, tell me about your intel job. Okay, that would, I was asking her about what she did before the military. I was asking her about what it's like to be a woman in a war zone. I was asking these human being questions and they gave such rich answers. I mean, that's something I think I've discovered and maybe not everybody knows. I'm sure your listeners probably do just because of the focus of your work, but the people that wear uniforms in our society are fascinating. They think about things. They're forced to make sometimes life and death decisions, but also just to see some of the most stark things of life. But also, from a veteran's perspective, when you're looking out a bullet shattered window as the sand's going by in Iraq, and you're looking at camels, and you're thinking about Babylon, which is where you are, it expands your mind. And the questions and the conversations you have, some of them are humorous, but also some are very, very deep and about life and about your life and reflective. And, there's a thing called post-traumatic growth. And if you process your experiences properly, your perspective widens and your understanding what's really important changes. So a lot of our service members are way deeper than maybe society would know at first glance.
Coming back from, and I'll call it a deployment because you were in a combat zone. Granted, you chose to take a camera and recording gear, but coming back from that, what would you say was the impact on you, which I'm assuming was the catalyst to start the workshops?
Well, so that's a great question. So coming back the first time, I would say my situational awareness was sort of through the roof. That was a huge impact. I'd had the fear of going into war zone and, the missions and the long days but I went back to Iraq a second time. Joe, and it's in the movie, challenged my experience. He was like, you did, I don't know what he said. It's 3 weeks. It was 6 weeks, but whatever. That's what brothers do. You don't know anything. You went on one mission. I did 120, whatever, but like the essence of what he was saying was actually valid as well. And so I did go back to Iraq and I went back to the Sunni Triangle between Ramadi and Fallujah. I was originally scheduled to go out with 82nd Airborne. They were going to get some guys out on the border, but the Delta Force liked the mission too. So I got bumped. Thanks, Delta. And so instead, apparently I have good taste in missions. And that happened when I was on my way to Baghdad. Every time I fly to Baghdad, things go haywire. But I'm in Baghdad. I have nowhere to go. I've got my camera crew and my gear, and I've got only 6 weeks of insurance. So I say, you guys got to get me something. Of course, it's the week of the election. So everybody's there. All the embeds are taken. They came to me after a couple of days. They go, well, we have this one embed. It's between Ramadi and Fallujah. It's with the National Guard and the Marine advisors. More IEDs go off on this road than anywhere else in Iraq. No one else wants it. What do you think? I said, I'll take it. Send me there. So I go there. One cameraman from Michigan local news had been out with the Michigan National Guard for 1 day and then left. Another writer had come, stayed on the base for a couple of days, left. So the first night I'm out, I go out with the infantry company. They're doing a cordon search because they got the elections the next day. The next day I'm out with the Iraqi army, going out and filming them and protecting the sites. So by day 2, I'd done 100% more coverage than the entire press corps of the world combined. They noticed. So next thing you know, invitations are coming. So we would go out 6 days a week. I'd take 1 day off so we could rest and not get sloppy because it was dangerous, as you can see in the movie. Mm-hmm. So pretty soon, I've had journalists go, how'd you get out with snipers? I go, they asked me. They said, when are you going to come with us? And so those are some of the people you meet in the film, like Frank. Frank, they invited me to go out. And I was like, okay, I'd love to. So, you know, it was like 4 or 5 snipers and then myself. And, you know, it was really, really scary. Climbing into a hide site at 2:00 in the morning in one of the worst places of Iraq, where they're using a mosque as a place to store weapons. I mean, the guy walked out with an AK. You know, and when the snipers are scared, because they think they're going to hit with an RPG, you notice. I mean, when service members get scared, that's when I go, okay, here we are. Then I'm scared.
Damn, this camera doesn't shoot bullets.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. And then I think it's important to say, you know, I went out with the Iraqi army. They were getting shot at. They were running towards the gunfire, so I was running towards it with them. And eventually, there was a particular mission. I was actually interviewing a Marine, and there's all this machine gun fire in the background, and he keeps talking like it's the soundtrack to his, you know, his movie. And all of a sudden, I'm like, Gunny, should we go see what's going on? And he goes, yes. So I went and grabbed my camera, right? Because like you and I, we're interviewing, but I'm mic'd over here. So I go and grab my camera. I run. I grab my body armor, my helmet, and I'm like, I'm coming with you. So I jump in the seat. Well, a Marine wants that seat. So the guy's like, here, sit here. So which is the ammo can. No one wanted to sit on the ammo can straddling the legs of the gunner. But I was like, okay, this is my ride. I got to go. So we jump out there and we drive out there, and Gunner, who's in this film as well, is out there. He was in a crossfire. By the time we get there, there's not a crossfire, but then we kind of go back and an IED goes off, and you can hear me saying, can we say bad words on this show, or is that not allowed? Okay. Sure. So, you know, I'm there and you can hear me going, shit, fuck. Now, meanwhile, I'm filming this. I've thought about like, what shot are you willing to die for? Like, cause you have to kind of think that way as a filmmaker a little bit. Like, I mean, I'm not trying to be dramatic or brave or anything. I'm just saying realistically, like I was every night going, how does this film end? What goes on? All of a sudden I'm there on the road and an IED's going off and so I bring the camera up and I get that shot. So I get the shot, but because I'm mic'd, you can hear me saying, fuck, shit. Cause as a human being, I'm like, what the heck is going on right now? I stay on.
I guarantee you every Marine and soldier says the same thing. They're just not mic'd.
They're just not mic'd. Well, like in my mind, I did my job, which was to get the shot. And then I pan to get back here, pan over here. And then I'm like, I got to get off the road. But, you know, I didn't drop the camera. I ran off. And with that, all that's in the film, like I ran off the road, and then I'm swinging the camera back and forth and I'm going in and out. And as I got off the road, 3 bullets come whizzing by the lens of my camera. And the Marine I was out with, when he first saw it, he goes, brother, the third one had your name on it. He was like, that was crazy. That came right by the lens. And that moment has pissed me off because it later turned out they captured those guys. Those were Syrians. So I got shot at by Syrians while I was out with the Iraqi army patrolling Iraq. There were 3 Americans there, 2 U.S. Marines, a medic, and Jake. Why are they shooting at me? I mean, I can tell you why, because it's a lot bigger story if you hit the American cameraman, right? So like, that's why they're shooting me. But like, I'm not shooting at you, so I'm not a threat. But yet if you hit me, then it's more PR for the other side. So let's shoot at the cameraman. And then after that, the other thing that's really crazy, and I've, you know, I don't talk about this very often, frankly. I guess we're here today. I've worked with Marines when they come back from combat, and I'll open up and talk about all this with them usually. But another thing that was really interesting was like, you know, combat starts and then it ends, and you never know that it's going to end. It's like, and you're like, is it over? Is it over? You don't know. Like, and you can hear my heavy breathing because I'm mic'd. I'm like, you know, your heart's breathing and stuff like that. And you're doing your job, but your heart's pounding, right? And you're just like, what is going on? And there's like 5 things going through your head, you know? And then the Iraqi guys are like, okay, I guess we're getting up on the road, and then we're running down the road, and then we come to the guys who are hurt. And the revelation for me was like, that was the biggest adrenaline rush of my life, followed by the saddest thing I've ever seen, which is the destruction to human life. You know, I walk up and the guy's bleeding. The other one's got his jaw busted up. And, you know, you asked what it's like to come home, and you know, I revisit the moment. In the first film, we really cover that. In this new film, the moment that I really cover is we go back to that moment, and I ask Gunner about it. And first he kind of blows it off. And I go, Gunner, That moment when you're on one knee and you're caressing the face of the wounded Iraqi soldier, for me, that was grace on earth. And I pushed in and got a close up. I never forgot. I mean that, but I'm not saying that flippant. That was grace on earth in the full definition. He was being so kind. It was unexpected. It was beautiful. And I brought him back to that moment because I was there. And he said, yeah, usually I just blow it by. Yeah, the bullets are flying, whatever. And he started thinking about it. And he started crying. And he then opens up in Brothers After War about that moment. And we have this moment, this experience. We revisit this, you know? And he says, that's because that's the human connection you have. You know, he was mine. He was my soldier. And, you know, what's important and tying it back to coming home is he reached out to me a couple months after I came. And he said, thank you for coming. It helped. It's a little painful sometimes in the moment to open up and talk. But if you find the right person, not just anybody, but if you find the right person, you relieve pressure on yourself when you start telling those stories to somebody that can understand. And that's what his experience was. And that made me feel really, really good. And to really fully answer your first question, so I came home from that experience. I was literally getting shot at, literally. Bullets flying by my camera, guys wounded, filming them. I left because we were running out of insurance. I kind of want to stay longer, but I had to go. And then I'm in the lobby of William Morris. And somebody comes up to me and goes, you see anybody get killed over there? And I was like, you know, I wish I'd had the presence of mind to go, tell me your most embarrassing sexual experience ever. Go. Because that's how much you just put me on the spot. And like, I had no preparation for that. And, you know, so I left, I go across the street, I get in line at Chipotle, excited to get a burrito, you know, probably better than the food in Iraq.
You've got a lot of coffee options out there. You've got a lot of veteran and first responder owned coffee companies as well. Trident Coffee is one of these companies, but they're different. Trident fuels your body and mind with a premium cold brew that's infused with powerful ingredients for performance, focus, and wellness. Made with organic MCT oil, lion's mane, and reishi mushrooms, this isn't just coffee. It's fuel for your brain, ensuring smooth, steady energy with no jitters and no crashes. Plus, the cocoa powder adds antioxidants, and the electrolytes keep you hydrated and balanced. Yes, they are cold brew experts, and their beans are brewed for cold brew optimization. But what does that mean for those of you who also love hot coffee like me? Their coffee tastes amazing, not bitter. So enjoy it hot or iced, mixed into your protein shake, or take it on the go. However you drink it, Trident Coffee is coffee upgraded. Get yours now at tridentcoffee.com and use the promo code TDP15 for 15% off your order. That's TDP15 for 15% off your order. Stay sharp, stay fueled, stay ready.
This woman in front of me, this 16-year-old, 17-year-old from Beverly Hills who's had a really hard life, I can tell you. She's sitting there and she goes, just a little bit of sour cream. And the woman puts some sour cream. She goes, like her day was ruined because there's too much sour cream in her burrito. I was like, I can't handle it. I gotta get the fuck out of here. And like just left. I was like, I can't handle this. Like I can't handle that emotional response to something that's totally meaningless. You know, and I share this because I've worked with a lot of veterans over the years and they laugh at these stories, you know, because the question they get asked is, have you killed anyone? And what I've found is most people in society don't know. That's a really personal question. And it's a really complicated situation. Whether it's yes or no, either way, it's very complicated. And you probably shouldn't be asking that question unless you have the relationship and the intention to ask them a very personal question. And also the why. You know, are you a family member? Do you care? Are you going into that line of work and you kind of really want to know about it, you know? Or do you feel like that person's maybe needs to talk about it? Like those are good intentions. But sometimes, unfortunately, I imagine same in the first responder world. I know it is in the veteran world. You get that question from somebody who's kind of like at a bar or they're flippant. They don't know what they're asking, you know? So you asked about transition. The things that were helpful for me was journaling, because I like to journal, because I think it's a good way. It's been proven. Marcus Aurelius journaled. I mean, warriors have made sense of their experience by journaling for millennia. That's why we do it in our workshops. And my brother Isaac, you know, my younger brother, knew I was in combat. He called me and he said, hey, how you doing? What's going on? I went to go see that Spielberg movie about snipers? He goes, yeah, that was a bad idea. I go, yeah, that was not good. It was way too much stimulus, you know? And he just talked me through it. He said, this is kind of what you can expect for the next couple months. And so that when it happened, I was like, oh, this is really helpful because it feels weird, but like he told me to expect this. So he's normalized it for me, right? And I got my journaling. The third thing is I had to make a movie and I had to talk to two guys who'd never been to war, my editor and my producer. And they're like, we got 3 or 4 months to cut this film and then we're out of money. So we got to go. So I was forced to watch footage of my own experience. And I had nightmares that night. The first time I watched that combat footage, I had crazy dreams, but I had to communicate. And I had to explain to people, no, that's not what it's like. It's like this. And this is how we're going to tell the story. I had to tell the story. I had to use art to tell my story. I didn't know it at the time, but I was processing my experience. I was getting to the next phase of it. And I was healing, right? So everything we've done with the workshops is really just trying to pass lessons on that I've learned firsthand from coming back from right between Ramadi and Fallujah and those experiences, trying to pass that on because I see myself, I'm not a service member. That's not my job. That's not who I am. I'm a storyteller and now a communicator and a facilitator, you know, somebody who can be like, I studied the human experience. And so I think sometimes that's what vets look at me for is like, how as a human can I go from this place to that place? And I go, well, here are some things that can help you with that. And it started with my personal lessons. And thanks to the Gary Sinise Foundation, I now have 3 fantastic trainers. And we now have a portfolio of all their experiences overseas in combat, but also they have a couple of doctorates in social work and the experience of doing this for 40,000 people. So now I often sound pretty smart when I'm working with people, but it's like, I didn't learn this just like yesterday. Like I've been doing this for 14 years. So this is like the, the combination of all the best lessons learned that I'm going to hand to you right now as a response to maybe where you're stuck, you know, in your transition coming home.
What was it like for you to do that first workshop?
Scary, terrifying. The first workshop, I show Gary Sinise the journal. I'm thinking like, okay, you're going to watch the movie, you'll journal at home. Great, right? Why not? Work for me, kind of a private thing. Gary sees the book and he goes, this looks great, Jake. Let's get this out here. So next thing I know, I'm at, an army base and I'm working with like 400 soldiers back from Iraq one day and 300 the next day. Okay, here's the film. Here's the journal. Dr. Scott Williams and I are literally outside the screening of the film. He's going, man, these are really great. This is great questions, you know? And Ellen Levine, was our graphic designer, had a master's in art therapy and counseling and all that. So we had that on our team. So that was helpful. And then these were questions that Norman Powell, my producing partner, interviewed 19 Medal of Honor recipients for a film called American Valor. I had interviewed 41 soldiers, Marines, airmen in a war zone. So I had a little bit of experience interviewing combat veterans and getting them to open up with a microphone on them and a camera on them. And so we poured all that experience into how to ask the questions, the order of the questions. She put the art. So Dr. Scott Williams, we're picking the questions. We go, okay, open-ended. What part of the film do you most relate to? Next, what's the impact been on your family? Third, what inappropriate questions you've been asked and what do you not like? And I just then went out and did it, did the journaling, did the response, kind of made it up on the fly. It was a hit. By the 4th one, the DOD had sent a team out to study it. 94% would recommend it to other military families. And then the Oklahoma National Guard lost 14 soldiers overseas. They were killed in action and they had a suicide and they asked me to speak. And I was like, okay, I could come speak. Because when you make a film, people ask you questions and it's great because you work so hard on a movie. It's 3 or 4 years of your life. So it's nice to have people care and you want to talk about it. But after a certain point, it's like, I thought it was cooler to use the film to ask you questions, right? So that's what we do in the workshop. We play the film, have you journal, and then I ask you questions. And then you use the film and the journals as a jumping off point to talk about yourself. Well, they agreed. So we expanded the workshop to 6 hours. We created journals for the family members. And the first time I get there, there's 1,000 Oklahoma National Guard soldiers back from Afghanistan and probably about 500 family members. It's Oklahoma. It's tough guys in Oklahoma. And you want to talk about feelings. Okay. I thought it was like the roughest.
Very touchy-feely group.
Yeah, very touchy-feely. Let me tell you. Rough crowd. I was using everything I ever learned. Oh my God. Yeah. I was using everything I'd ever learned doing theater, to get them to respond, to get them to, volunteer their buddies to talk. And I walk off stage, at lunchtime. The people that brought me in run over to me. They're like, oh my God, I can't believe how much you're getting them to open up. And I'm like, that's them opening up, I was like, that's like roughest crowd I've ever been in front of. And, but I checked back in with Scott, and Scott was like, Jake, let me tell you something. You get a guy in Oklahoma to say 3 words for the first time from a medical standpoint, that is way more meaningful to me than somebody in California says their sad story for the 5th time. It makes you feel better because they're opening up and it's this story. But let me tell you, if you get those guys in Oklahoma to kind of say a couple sentences and they do some journaling, like that's huge. And so that was helpful. And I got welcomed back. I heard later that the battalion commander came to the lieutenant colonel that brought me in and said, we're not doing this. We're not doing this today. And he's like, yes, we are. Jake's here. The workbooks are here. The movie's ready to go. Like, we're going to do this. But afterwards, we'll adjust and whatever. So he comes up and he goes, okay, that's the best thing we've ever had coming home from war. Here's how you can make it better. And he had suggestions, which we incorporated. And so the workshops is pretty good these days, but it's had a lot of, suggestions.
Massaging.
Yeah, well, just feedback, and we're constantly adapting it. Now we've redone the workbook and we've adapted it. We have a little thing for my sister, because my sister also serves. She kicks off the afternoon with a short film, and it's focused on general resiliency and general stresses of serving. So, because the makeup of the military has changed. When I first started these workshops, everyone was coming back from the war zones. It was like that. 14 people died, 10 people died in this battalion. There was a suicide a week before you get there. It was hot and heavy, right? It was tough. Now it's not as, they're coming back from Poland, or it's a general resiliency workshop, or there's a suicide on a base and they ask us to come in. So we had to adapt it to like military service in general, which we've done. And so we made the workbook work for that. And frankly, we do it for Air Force and airmen all the time. And some of the times those are our best audiences. We tell them, look, we know this is not necessarily your experience. This is a film about military service and its toll on your life. And we want to use it as a jumping off point to talk about your life and your service. And it works. And to bring it full circle, that's the beauty about Brothers After War. We all have transitioned in our life. We all have had to change identity. We've all had to move into a new phase of our life. And all of us will experience trauma at some point. We can learn a ton from these people who volunteered to serve us and volunteered to run towards the gunfire and then had to deal with the trauma that is associated with that, and then are trying to not just survive, but thrive. And Gary Sinise once said, seeing this film, he's like, we want our vets to feel like Lieutenant Dan. Like, yeah, they have some tough times, but they can overcome it. They can work through it. They have to go on a journey. But at the end, if you look at Lieutenant Dan at the end of that film, he's successful. He's got his new legs. He's got a business. He's got a relationship. And he's going to go off and have a great, third act. I'd say the second act was tough, but he's going to have a great third act. And that's what I want for all of our veterans. And I think the film is an opportunity to come together as a community, for them to see themselves in one of those 12 veterans in the film, but also for the American public to maybe learn from them something they can apply in their own lives. And also, I just think if you see them as I've seen them, you would agree that I think the best part of my generation is the one that has volunteered us to serve us, both overseas and back here, and volunteers to defend us, whether that's on the front lines in a war zone, whether that's in a fire department in New York, or on the police force in LA, or in the FBI or whatever. Like, some people volunteer to take on the toughest things, to put themselves at risk, to see some of the saddest stuff. And I've been so overwhelmed by them. That's why I've spent 21 years in this project.
For somebody who wants to go to one of these workshops, can they go one off? And what I mean by that is, if I'm a veteran and I'm not necessarily assigned to that Oklahoma unit, could I drop in on one, and how frequently are they?
So Brothers at War is usually done with a military unit, maybe reserve, maybe guard, active duty. Maybe they come back from a deployment. We have pre-deployment as well. If they had a relationship with the unit, maybe they could get in, some of them. But Brothers After War is a different story. Brothers After War is community-based. So in Brothers After War, we have found we want to actually rent out the movie theater, and maybe get it from 8 to 12 in the morning and play the film, give everybody journals, do group discussions. So the Gary Sinise Foundation it's free to everybody, to the vets. It's free to the first responders. It's free to their families. And they get a little introduction. They watch the film. After the film, we have journals that are Brothers After War journals. We have 4 journaling exercises. And then after each journaling exercise, we kind of lead a group discussion. And then usually after that, we have like a little community hour where people can come up and talk to us or break bread, because we want to build community. We want you go to the workshop, somebody you might not know down the aisle opens up and says something, you're like, that's exactly what I felt. And then maybe you guys start talking and you create a relationship out of that and get, extra support or extra insight, So we want that to happen. That's part of it. So to answer your question, the Brothers After War seminars are community-based. And our intention is to keep doing those for decades to come. In some ways, this theatrical release for Brothers After War, it's an invitation for Americans to see our service members on the big screen and really experience it like you can't any other way, right? And do it as a community and make it a moment of communication and camaraderie. But it's also a way for veterans to dip their toe in. Just come see the movie. Go see it with your spouse if you want, or your friend. Just go see the film, see if you relate to it. Go on a Friday night, get some popcorn and a Coke, enjoy yourself. Heck, the Gary Sinise Foundation will even buy your ticket for you so you can go when it's convenient for you. That's part of the reason they did that too, by the way. They also serve first responders, and we know first responders have crazy schedules. So that's why I was very passionate about doing it this way. It's not one screening. Oh, you're working at 7 o'clock on Friday? Sorry, you can't go. No. 4 screenings a day, 7 screenings for the week. You can come the first weekend, Gary Sinise Foundation's got your ticket. I think that's awesome, right? You can come and just see the film. If you like the film, whenever we have enough demand in a community, because I can't, the seminars, I've got to have trainers there and workbooks. I can't do it for 5 people. We really want to work with 100 to 200 people at a time to really, maximize the benefit and the impact for the Gary Sinise Foundation that's funding it. So those are going to be with communities, and wherever there's like a lot of, here we are in Temecula, right? You got a ton of veterans. If the veterans of Temecula were like, hey, come and do a seminar for us, we'd be like, absolutely. Let's time it so it's not, up against the biggest wine festival of the year, or, we did it in Colorado Springs. We did it when there was not a home Air Force game. You know what I mean? Like, I always try to work with the locals to go like, when should we do this? So like everybody will actually want to come in our community. And honestly, even February 28th was with that in mind. It's a couple weeks after football season. It's sometimes vets might be looking for an activity, might be looking for some camaraderie. It's the end of winter. Sometimes a little depression with that. We wanted to use this as a moment to say, hey, let's get together. Let's have some fun. Let's throw a party. Let's throw a veteran appreciation night. Let's all go see the film together and have community. I've got like 10 Q&As after these films. The veterans that are in the film are spread out across the country on Friday night. They're doing Q&As with the film. We're doing some premieres. Some nonprofits have bought out the theater and giving tickets away to the local veterans to try to make it an evening of celebration for our vets. So I would have done that at every single of the 120 locations if I could have. I tried, but I'm only one man and I've got a small team. But we really have bent over backwards to try to make this, fun. And, the ancient Greeks created theater. It was veterans trying to explain to the rest of society what war was like. That's how theater was created.
Huh.
So I want to recapture that tradition with the American art form, which is film, and turn our modern cultural centers, our movie theaters, into that same thing, into that theater back from the ancient Greeks, and allow our veterans, 12 veterans telling their story. I'm just a conduit. It's their film, not mine. Have them tell the American public, this is what it's like to come home from war.
to circle back around as we start to wrap this up, because I know you got to get to other meetings. It was interesting that you mentioned the incident of sitting on the ammo can, because cars and seats or available seats seem to be a reoccurring problem for you. There's a scene with your brother trying to explain you've only got 4 seats and we got you and your crew. But the best one is when you're with your kids and you get in and you could hear you saying, just ignore him. And then the next scene is the cameraman stuck in between the seats of your kids.
Yeah, and my daughter going, do we have to bring the cameraman? I'm like, just ignore him. And like, it's obvious you can't. I mean, they're stuffed in the car with the cameraman. Yeah, listen, the film has a lot of humor. Most of it is at my expense. I think that's an important element of it. We didn't want to overwhelm people. We want to have a good, fun ride. I jump out of an airplane, we go scuba diving. These are all elements of a real human experience. And we wanted that in the movie. My kids are in the film. They make people laugh. I just think that's important. Sometimes people take these topics on and I think they just overload it and depress the audience. And it's actually also not realistic for a veteran. Veteran doesn't walk around in that place all the time, right? Like it's sort of special for them to share that with you. But that's not all of their experience. And I wanted to really present a holistic picture of who we have serving us. And I want you to be able to go to see the film and be, wow, that was amazing. Okay, there were a couple moments. There was some water on the edge of my eye. I don't know how it got there, but I also was laughing a lot. And, you make point of Joe. Joe's been busting my chops for 15 years. He used to do it in the first film. I think people got a kick out of it. And so you can see he's doing it 15 years later, he's still giving me a hard time. I love Joe to death. He's the greatest. We're closer now than ever. And I will tell you this. My brother Isaac was really the one who wanted to make the first film to get the truth home. It was Joe that wanted to make this film. He felt like this film could really help and potentially save the lives of other veterans. And on November 16th of this last year, we did a film and a seminar, and 3 vets went out to the little mobile vet clinic and signed up for counseling afterwards. The veteran who asked me to come there and was driving force in it, called me and said, Jake, Brothers After War, the movie and the seminar, saved my life. So Joe, that's what Joe wanted for this project. The film hasn't even been released and it's already done that.
I will say that anybody who watches this, there's going to be a benefit in a lot of different levels. Obviously, veterans themselves are going to be able to see the importance of talking and opening up and the experience of transitioning. But the people who are also going to benefit are family members, wives, spouses, children, bringing in the perspective of what the kids experience when their parents deploy and are gone is huge to really paint, in my opinion, the full picture of what it costs to serve this country. Mm. And so I'm grateful that you put this out, and I wish you the best with it. Anything we haven't touched on that you want to make sure we talk about?
No, I think, look at it. If you go to tickets.brothersafterwar.com, you can see if the film is playing in your town. If it is, grab a ticket. If the promotion's still there, if it hasn't run out, VetTix. Go to VetTix and you can get a free ticket. If you don't see your community on the list, go to the movie theater and ask them to play it. I have worked for the last 8 months to try to get the film out to wherever there was demand for it. And if that doesn't work, reach out to us on the website. Go to info@brothersafterwar.com. I often read those emails myself. Someone on my team will read them. The Gary Sinise Foundation, we will work tirelessly to bring this film to whoever wants it. We made this film for you. We made this film for your families. We want you to be able to see it. And we're going to be, doing the seminars and whatnot for years to come. So, if you're listening to this and it's not in your community, I'm sorry, we tried, but take action, ask us to come, and we're going to try to, have the movie in theaters for at least 2, 3, 4 weeks. And then after that, do an impact campaign and take it out where there's demand. So, and then after that, it'll be released digitally and all of that. But I just want to let people know, I don't think there's ever been a documentary about our veterans released on as many screens as this since World War II. And that was very important to me. I probably made it clear that I think the best part of my generation volunteered to serve. And I really wanted to take the focus off of things that sometimes are quite trivial, I think, in our society, and put it on something that really matters. And that's the people that volunteer to serve us. And that's why they're in so many theaters. And I want to just conclude also with 100 of those movie theaters are Regal Cinemas. So Regal Cinemas says they support the troops. I think they're showing us that they do as well. And I just want to take a moment to say thank you to them, because they are a huge part of the equation here too, allowing the film to have a chance in all these communities across America.
I wish you all the best with it, and I wish you all the best going forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
As always, thank you for listening or watching the episode. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to reach out on social media or send me an email. The links are all in the show notes. I'd love to hear from you. Also, if you're not already, please follow the podcast on whatever platform you get your podcasts. You can also subscribe on YouTube. And if you would, please leave me a rating. Ratings do two things. You can tell me what I need to fix or improve, and the more ratings also gets the podcast recommended to more people. Another ask, please share the podcast with anyone you think could benefit from and enjoy it. And last, don't forget, sign up for the newsletter.